Welcome to Aquatic Biology. Today, we are going to explore one of the most fascinating and vital regions of our planet's oceans, the continental shelf. Imagine walking into the ocean from a sandy beach. That gently sloping ground beneath your feet is just the beginning of a massive underwater world. We will uncover why this shallow zone is the true ecological powerhouse of the marine environment. Let us start by visualizing what the continental shelf actually is. When you wade into the ocean, the floor does not suddenly drop off into a dark abyss. Instead, you are walking on a gently sloping underwater plain. This area is essentially the edge of the continent that happens to be flooded by the ocean right now. If sea levels were to drop, as they did during the last ice age, this vast underwater terrace would be exposed as dry land. It is a seamless extension of the terrestrial world into the marine one. Now that we understand what the shelf is, let us look at how it is bounded. In oceanography, the continental shelf extends from the shoreline outward until it reaches a distinct point called the shelf break. The shelf break is a dramatic geological feature. It is the exact point where the gently sloping ocean floor suddenly begins to drop much more steeply. This steep drop-off marks the transition into the continental slope, plunging down toward the deep ocean basin. Understanding this boundary is crucial for mapping the marine environment. Building on those boundaries, let us consider the sheer scale of this zone. On average, the continental shelf extends about 80 kilometers from the coast, though it can be much wider in places like Siberia. At the shelf break, the average depth is roughly 130 meters. When you compare this to the open ocean, which averages about 4,000 meters deep, the shelf is incredibly shallow. Because of this shallow depth, the water here is constantly mixed and influenced by waves, tides, and coastal currents, making it a highly dynamic physical environment. This shallow physical environment leads us directly to its most important feature: its biology. You might wonder why we care so much about this specific zone. The answer is sunlight. Because the water is shallow, sunlight can often penetrate all the way to the ocean floor. This creates a massive photic zone, a region where photosynthesis can thrive. This abundant solar energy fuels the explosive growth of phytoplankton, seaweeds, and towering kelp forests. These primary producers form the foundation of a rich and complex marine food web. The biological richness we just discussed has massive implications for our entire planet. Even though the continental shelf makes up less than 10% of the ocean's total surface area, it is so productive that it provides over 90% of the world's global fish catch. It supports massive populations of fish, marine mammals, and bottom-dwelling organisms. Furthermore, these shelves are economically vital to human civilization, as they hold vast, accessible reserves of oil, natural gas, and valuable minerals beneath the seafloor. To truly appreciate how incredibly flat this biological powerhouse is, we must move beyond descriptions and look at the math. Oceanographers use a standard gradient formula to map the topography of the ocean floor. The formula is m equals delta y divided by delta x. Here, m represents the gradient or slope. Delta y is the vertical drop in depth, measured in meters, and delta x is the horizontal distance traveled from the coast, measured in kilometers. If the depth increases rapidly over a short distance, the slope becomes steeper. But on the continental shelf, a large distance with very little depth change results in a very small, gentle slope. Before we move on, let us see this formula in action with a concrete example. An oceanographer is mapping a section of the Atlantic coast. She finds that the shelf extends outward for a horizontal distance of 150 kilometers, and the depth at the shelf break is exactly 120 meters. We want to find the average gradient. We take our vertical drop of 120 meters and divide it by the horizontal distance of 150 kilometers. This gives us a final gradient of 0.8 meters per kilometer. This means for every full kilometer you swim out, the floor drops by less than 1 meter, proving just how flat the shelf truly is. Now that we have mathematically proven how flat and shallow the shelf is, let us return to the sunlight that makes it so productive. As light travels down through the ocean water, it does not just pass through freely. It gets absorbed by water molecules and scattered by floating particles. This means that the intensity of the sunlight decreases exponentially as you move deeper into the water column. For the kelp forests and seaweeds to survive, a sufficient amount of this light must successfully reach the bottom. To understand exactly how much light makes it down, we rely on a specific mathematical model. This brings us to the Beer-Lambert law, which calculates exactly how much light reaches a specific depth. The formula is I sub z equals I sub 0 times e raised to the power of negative k times z. Let us break this down. I sub z is the light intensity at our target depth. I sub 0 is the initial light intensity right at the ocean surface. The constant e is the base of the natural logarithm. The variable k is the light attenuation coefficient, which measures how murky the water is. A higher k means murkier water. Finally, z is the depth in meters. Because the shelf is shallow, z remains small, allowing enough light to survive the journey to the bottom. Let us apply this law to see if a kelp forest can survive at a depth of 30 meters. We are given a bright surface light intensity of 1,000 watts per square meter and a water attenuation coefficient of 0.05. We plug these into our formula. Multiplying the murkiness by the depth gives us an exponent of negative 1.5. Evaluating e to the negative 1.5 gives us 0.223, meaning about 22% of the light survives. Multiplying this by the initial 1,000 watts gives a final intensity of 223 watts per square meter. Since this is well above the 10-watt threshold for photosynthesis, the kelp will thrive. Now that we have calculated both the physical slope and the light penetration, let us look at this cross-section diagram to bring it all together. On the left, you can see the coast transitioning smoothly into the continental shelf. Notice how gently it slopes compared to the steep drop-off at the shelf break, which plunges down the continental slope to the abyssal plain. Above the shelf, those yellow arrows represent sunlight easily reaching the ocean floor, creating the vibrant photic zone we just modeled. This visual perfectly captures why the shallow shelf is so uniquely suited to support abundant marine life compared to the deep, dark ocean basin. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us review our key takeaways. First, the continental shelf is a shallow, gently sloping underwater plain that acts as a flooded extension of our continents. Second, this shelf extends outward until it hits the shelf break, where it drops steeply into the deep ocean. Third, and most importantly, its shallow depth allows abundant sunlight to reach the bottom, driving immense biological productivity. This unique combination of a flat physical gradient and high light penetration is exactly why this specific zone supports the vast majority of the world's marine life and human fisheries. Excellent work today.